The Woman with the Cigarette Holder. A Faux late 1930s film script by Daniel Scott Batten. Sometimes I wonder if space and time are just the illusions, the fermentations of spirit distilled in a rapture of unending waves of time. You may find this a most peculiar start to a movie, and indeed it likely is most odd and intriguing. But that, my friends, is the weight and the provenance of the film industry. Besides my stark and manly voice, my handsome face, if I may dare say, is the hook and the prey of Hollywood. Well, now, this story began way back in the autumn of 1919. I was just out of college, and I was looking forward to a future with great promise. I was so pleased to have had the advantage to miss out on the bravery of war, as so many of my friends who fought died in the battlefields of Europe. My soul was flavored by their sacrifice, and in a tribute to them, I dedicated the rest of my days to celebrating them and living in their stead. The world was a great profusion of consternation mixed with hope and the hornet's nest of human nature. The world had become fierce with an energy that can only be devolved as ecstatic, wild, and unrepentant. Jazz music was rising alongside the bar music of that African tribe, and long cigarette-wielding women of speed, rush, hustle, sexual freedom, and partying until 2 a.m. became the engine of the time.
Hey, watch out! Look where you're going!
Wow. God does work in mysterious and wonderful ways. What a specimen of beauty. Aren't you glad you didn't hit me?
Well, I can see you have all the charm of a man, but you have the look of a boy. What is your deal? Trying to steal a kiss before getting a job?
Yes, and I can see you are one of those. This is our independent women. This is ours going to a costume party. What is it with that silly hat and that long tube you are sucking on? Like if you take a big enough breath, gold will shoot from the other end.
I am still looking for that gold. Maybe you will be the factor that changes luck to a blessing. By the by, I am not wearing a costume. I am the new woman. The woman that can do everything as good as any man.
I don't doubt that you can smoke like a man. However, you could use some driving lessons. I do like it when you pucker your mouth so. Perhaps you can move that cigarette and make room for my lips. It was a most special meeting, as anyone with a heart can see. She was a spectacle creature, a divine mistress far ahead of the time. I fell in love with the very first bit of sass and strength she uttered. Her entire presence carried a vitality that perhaps no woman before or after could muster. Well, sadly, destiny had other ideas than I, and I didn't see her again for many years. I carried on with life in the usual way. I got a job at a local newspaper as an editor. I read many a wild story, some too prescient for eager ears and too notorious for exuberating. I met a few women of fine looks and good humor, but none could take away the pressing memory of that flapper girl I met back in 1919. It was now 1927, and much had changed in the world and in my life since that fated day, but in my heart, time had stood still. I had decided after a very long and depressing day at work to stop in a local cafe. It was a small joint hidden on a mostly forgotten corner of the city. I liked it for this reason, where I was able to sit in relative silence and sip tea and speculate on the errors of the times. I edited many of my pages here, and the waiter made his living from my tips. I often lumbered there for 3 or 4 hours, peering over the fragments of the age, looking for the dust I could turn into gold. Peering over the brim of my cup, my eyes leapt 3 tables over, where I saw her. She was reading the newspaper I write for, and she was juxtaposing to 2 youngsters. I felt my heart fail. My world collapsed into a vitriol of disdain and cataclysm. I knew, then and there it was likely, she was now in the realm of impossibility. Her neatly brushed hair falling into splendid curls, the fashion of the time, on her shoulders like waves, and her bright red lips, sipping her coffee as she read with vigor and perhaps an uncontained enthusiasm, similar to conviction. That is when it hit me. I had to write an editorial that would call to her. I had to speak to her heart through the pages of my newspaper. Brilliant, I thought to myself. But again, I looked over at her, and her gleeful charm and whimsical expressions again made me feel ill with loss and want. And like thunder, the cool eyes looked up, and with elegance and softness, like God showing his light, she looked straight at me. Delicately she smiled, and her face beamed with tenderness. She slowly, intentionally lifted her right hand and waved with a soft vigor at me. My heart pulsed in my chest, and I could feel everything wonderful bubbling up from the depths of my soul. Then the waiter interrupted the seance, and all the spirits broke like glass onto the floor of my dreams. I looked down, shyly and ashamed of my deepening feelings of love and fear. I absorbed myself again in my work. Perhaps 5 or so minutes passed when I took a chance at catching her eyes again. But to my horror, she had already left, leaving the newspaper and my heart on the table she left empty. It wasn't until weeks, or was it months later, that I decided to compose a bloodline prose of tender-hearted drama, my tragic sense of life, an editorial on my soul's love-lost despair. Here I share it with you. Imagining that she was reading it back to me.
There was a long and distant time when I was still a tender buck, lost in a world both new and terrible, bold and beautiful. I had all the promises of my age, the desires of the world and its foretold expectations, streaming in my veins like acid and like water. Then, in a flash of danger, a wink of time led me to the most sacred moment of my entire life to this point. Eternity wrapped itself so exclusively and so wonderfully into a single frame of time, everything life is built upon. I fell in love in a hair's breadth. I was unraveled and wound back up in a span so long it was missed, if not perceived, in a millisecond. My heart is furious with pomp and circumstance as I write this here editorial. For the moment is so instilled in my psychology that I fear without it, that I too, like this seminal moment, would diminish and fade like a picture lost in the violence of a summer breeze. Though sacred and immensely personal, I take the advantage of my position and my faculties to get to the bread of it. I was walking, minding my own business, completely caught in a daydream of some such, when the sound of an abrupt car horn stole me back into reality. Upon finding myself back on the soil of the earth, I realized sitting in her car and honking her horn was the Bella and the Donna that minced me to a quick. She took no time to capture all my assumptions and twirl them on their heads of what a woman was supposed to be. She wore a silly hat, the new flapper fashion, and I made a joke about her long cigarette holder and gold dust coming from it. With this, I say too much, but too much is not enough. Senior, Peter Goldsmith, Senior Editor.
Years more had passed, and nothing seemed to come of my desperate attempt to commune with the nameless lady from all those years ago. It was now 1932, and all felt lost in the realm of love. I had made a success of myself. My editorial had become the top red column in all the land. It was a sacred conviction, as I wanted to keep my promise to all my brothers that died in the war. And I wanted to give to a world that hungered and ached and needed comfort and words of consolation. Nothing in life twists as one expects it. But I do find that God knows what he is doing, even if it feels like he is ripping out hearts and not mending them. But it is the brokenness that makes a man great. It is redemption that makes a soul a soul. It is now 1934, and it is the sound of the train that sounds almost like a coo of the dove, and instantly I realized upon rereading last week's write-ins to the paper that there was a piece submitted and published with a picture to accommodate. It was her. She wrote to my newspaper. What could it have said? My trembling body shook, and my fingers eagerly devoured each line with my eyes in anticipation. What did it say?
My name is Ellen Westfield, and I am a fashion designer of women's clothing, and I am selling off some of my wares and clothes at a fabulously low price. I am currently getting ready to put on this year's grandest show of fashion at the Grand Opry in downtown, where all the best designers and fashionistas come each to share and learn from each other. I will have by myself my 2 nieces now ground up. They're as models for my brand, but I am looking for 3 more persons to help set up and or model some of the clothing. Signed, Ellen Westfield, addresses omitted.
This revelation, this scripture of my Mycardia, translated into a yearning and an expectation that lead my spirit into a transfixed state that can only be said in religious terms, a transfiguration. Ministans most Paris Smosh, I made sure to take care of all business leading up to the Opry show, calling all contacts, organizing all meetings with fundraisers, conglomerates, and associates. Time passed like static, slow and electric. I also made a profound alternation, my in-being, and I decided to attend the church my parents used to go to. It felt like this heavenly moment was more than a selfish epitaph, but a memorial of the blessings of a loving God. In this time of my life, I could feel all the wounds of life healing one by one. It was almost like a fire had swept through the wilderness of my soul and left a new and fertile ground. I was being reinvented in these many months leading up to the Opry. When the long-anticipated date at the Opry loomed, I could feel the burning, but it wasn't the same burning I had experienced before. It was an unfamiliar form of heat, and it melded and even melted something in me more pervasive than any ideation or desire had ever endowed.
Welcome to the Grand Opry Fashion Show. It is a great pleasure to have you all here to not just support our vision as artists, but also to support us as visionaries and friends of the human race. We are happy ensigns of both hope and beauty, deep and everlasting mentors to all, and friends to peace and to love. Please do enjoy all the festivities, the free and open bar, and the delicious food on your menu. God bless us all.
It was a most beautiful expression of beauty, hope, and provision. The drinks were fantastic, the food divine, and she looked transported. In fact, her transportation was beyond all reflection. It was easy for me to see that time had done her justice, and in reflection, it also did me well, too. How could I fret over any of my bewailments? A feeling unfamiliar to me, but possibly the most genuine I ever felt in all my life, I recognized her happiness, and my happiness no longer hinged on us, but on our impact and our passion for expressing something good and powerful to the betterment of all.